So, a very warm welcome and very good evening to all the participants who are joining in today's session. First of all, a thank you for joining today's session and sparing your time out on this Saturday evening. This is because you always take time out, you always want to learn. We keep on bringing such insightful sessions for you, be it on GST, be it on cryptocurrency, be it on various topics, because we only want you to grow and learn and keep growing and serving your clients. As I can see in the chat box, people have started to join in. So we are waiting for exactly, we are on time. So we'll wait for all our friends to join in, because only together we can grow. So good evening, Shripati ji. Good evening, Anthony ji. Good evening, Subramanian ji. Vadakkam, namaste, sat sri akal. Hope you are doing all well. Things are started to slow down and becoming really COVID had the phase 2, the wave 2, which had affected us so in such a manner, but still it's now going it's going slow, and so please do take due precautions whenever you step out of your house. Do it only when it's necessary, because as it said, prevention is always better than cure. So take due precautions, mask पहनिए and अपना सैनिटाइजर वगैरह जैसा है वो अपना आपका ख्याल आप खुद रख सकते हैं. हेल्थ इज ऑलवेज मोर इम्पोर्टेंट देन योर वर्क. अगर हेल्थ है, आप सही हैं, तो ही आप काम कर पाएंगे. So good evening, Prem Raj ji. Good evening, Rohit ji. Good evening, Abhishek ji. So today's session is on arrest provisions in GST. So we have another speaker with us, Advocate Radha ji, who had been there, who visits Bombay High Court. So we'll tell more about her in some time, so that no one misses the introduction. Yeah, so good evening, Sumit ji. Good evening, Rohan ji. Keep using this chat box. Actually, this is the only way where we can interact, right? अगर आप chat box use नहीं करेंगे तो हमें पता नहीं चलेगा interactive कैसे बनेगा session, right? So good evening, everyone. जो भी आपके क्वेश्चंस हैं, कीप राइटिंग डाउन इन द चैट बॉक्स, सो दैट टुडे स्पीकर्स कैन जब आप अपना लैपटॉप या अपना मोबाइल शट डाउन करें तो आप सेटिस्फाई होकर जाने चाहिए कि आपको अपनी सारी क्वेरीज का आंसर मिला हो. So make sure that you ask queries and you get the response in return. And what else? For the smooth deliberation, everything is working fine from our side. कोई issue नहीं है. Everything net, audio, video is working completely perfectly fine. So अगर आपको कुछ issue आता है बीच में, please I would request you to refresh your internet connection. First thing is this. Second, the PPT of today's presentation will be provided to you by tomorrow or by at max Monday, because it's weekend. So we'll make sure that by tomorrow you get the PPT. So don't worry about the PPT. Just focus and keep learning whatever today's speakers had, prepared for you, had thought of making you aware. So yes, and last but not the least, many of you have asked throughout the week. Many of you had asked about the OptoTax. So OptoTax is nothing but आपके लिए ही बनाया गया एक छोटा सा प्लेटफॉर्म है जहाँ पर आप पढ़ सकते हैं, where you can learn, where you can grow. And since आप लोग के पास GST के बहुत सारे clients होंगे, so आपकी benefit के लिए, आपके advantage के लिए एक प्लेटफॉर्म क्यूरेट किया गया है. So if anyone wants to know the details, you can just click on the offer and you can start. You can get all the details on your mail IDs. Now it's the time. I would like to call upon our speaker for today. First, I welcome Radha ma'am on our platform. It's an honor to share the screen with you. So just in a very small introduction, though you don't need it, but still it's my duty. So Radhaji is practicing as an advocate at DHL Legal since last 2 years. She has been professional experience of more than 4 years in the field of direct and indirect litigation. She regularly appears before the Bombay High Court, various tribunals, metropolitan magistrates, and First Appellate Authority. She has assisted in matters of Benami law, IBC, and other elite laws. She had regularly contributed articles on the taxation and elite laws to the various leading legal journals, magazines, and websites such as Taxman, ITA Online, the Chambers Journal, published by the Chamber of Tax Consultants, etc. We welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the kind words.
Now, for the, I guess Navjotji doesn't need any, introduction, but still, he is an associate member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, having more than 3 years of experience in the indirect tax laws, appeals, tax restructuring, tax advisory, and consulting pertaining to GST, service tax, VAT, excise, and customs. He had conducted GST impact analysis of large number of companies and helped them in implementing GST. He had also assisted in preparation of documents, representations, and coordinations with various targeted departments for processing various subsidy incentives as announced by central and state governments. So over to you, over to both of you, and now you can take the deliberation forward. Navjot, your voice is not audible. Yeah.
Is it better now? Yes. So yes. So good evening, everyone. So thanks a lot, Octotex and Tanya, for such a wonderful introduction, and thanks Radha for joining in for such a important topic, which is kind of becoming a new normal one in these days, because arrest provisions in GST, or be it like any tax laws, are kind of a troublemaker provisions which we see, and a lot of high courts and even the Supreme Court have affirmed kind of constitutional validity of all these provisions. Still, few of the matters are pending for the Supreme Court. So we thought of coming up with this webinar wherein we'll be guiding you through all the provisions which are given in the GST law. And since there is an interplay, I would say there are few powers which are given through CRPC to GST officers in particularly arrest provisions. So we'll be discussing that as well. So I'll be covering the part of two basic sections, two important sections, Section 69 and 132 of GST Act, which covers basically the basic provision of arrests. And Radha will be taking care of the interplay between CRPC and the procedural part of arrest. So we basically have covered these topics. First one would be the background of arrest and arrest provisions which are in GST, and the portion taken out by Radhaji would be classification of offences, procedure of arrest and bail provisions, and the key judicial announcements. Now you see, arrest is kind of a act which is apprehending and taking a person into custody. So this is a kind of a part of criminal justice system. Now normally you see these powers are like vested with the police only, but when we see it from a tax perspective, so they have kind of joined two acts together. One would be the economic law, or I would say tax law, and the another would be the CRPC, through which powers are vested with the policemen. Now why this arrest provisions are kind of a troublemaker in GST law or being any tax law? There is a basic principle which I see is, obviously when there is an unjust law itself, it is a violence. But if you arrest for breach of unjust law or unjustified law, if there is law which is kind of badly drafted, so it is kind of a more violent thing to do. Now why this have become important? Because if we see the Article 21 of Constitution of India, which gives us the right of life and liberty, or I would say the sacred freedom which is given in the Article 21, is being exploited through all these sections which are provided in CRPC. These were given for the protection of the public, or these were given for the peace. These sections were kind of a peacemaker or for protection against evil. But the the use, if you see on the grassroots level, how these provisions are being used by police or maybe by tax authorities, it's becoming an issue now. Now, at the same time, if we talk in a perspective of tax law, you see there is an Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD. You must be seeing a lot of updates regarding to international taxation from this organization. But when the GST law was enacted in 2017, there was a paper which was published, or there was a guidelines which was published by this organization titled Fighting Tax Crime, the 10 Global Principles, in which you see India is also a member of this organization. So the basic principle which was enshrined in this particular guidelines was, it was made sure that tax crime should be criminalized. So they put an emphasis on criminalization of tax crimes. Now, if you see the particular point 5 and 6 of those particular guidelines, so it was mentioned that the precise way of criminalizing violations of tax law will vary from one jurisdiction to another. Each jurisdiction has a different legal system which reflects and interacts with a particular culture, policy, and legislative environment. Whatever the particular details of legal framework are, it will be most effective if law clearly defines the tax offenses that are criminalized. A criminal sanction applies if an offense is proven, and more serious offenses are punishable by more serious criminal sanctions, and criminal sanctions are applied in the practice. So they basically kind of are guided to all the members of this organization that, as you know, that every law in each country is different. Now they said that the law which is prevail in particular jurisdiction should be designed in a way that the criminalization of tax offenses and all the related rules related to it should be clearly stated. How an offense will be taken care of through arrest or maybe any prosecution, and if that crime is particularly a serious crime, then how it should be dealt with. Apart from that, if you see it in a perspective of tax, so the word arrest usually comes with the realm of criminal jurisdiction. Now that being said, there has been an increased amount of legislative backing with countries are now giving to civil arrest, especially in field of taxation. In GST also we'll see that a clear guidelines of arrest has not been given, or even you see the guidelines for the provisions which are given clearly are not being followed. So the provisions for which the guidelines are not given, you can imagine that how this section or provisions are being misused. Now it must be clarified that civil prosecution under tax law is neither new or isolated occurrence. You see direct tax law as well. In that also we see a prosecution section are there. Now there might be a comparative study which we can do, that how the mindset works in a direct tax law and how a person makes fraud in an indirect tax law. There are few sections in GST or you say in income tax which are kind of interrelated with each other, be it related to inspection or some other provisions are there through which the income is taxed in both the laws. Now in GST you say there is a section 69 in which this power is being given. Now you see, before we go into this, there is a slight change when GST law is enacted, because the powers which were given earlier to police, if you see the VAT laws, in that the power of arrest was given to the police. Like the proper file was handed over by the commissioner to the police and the rest of the proceedings were done by the policeman after that. But in GST it's not like that. Power is vested with the commissioner, and assistant commissioner and deputy commissioner are empowered to act as a policeman. So there is a slight change in that. Now all the prosecutable offenses were bailable and non-cognizable earlier. Importantly, the VAT officer did not have power to arrest. As I said, he did not have that power to order for the arrest. The actual power only was with the police only. Now let's read out the section 69 which empowers commissioner to do that. Now read the keywords carefully which they have used in this. Where the commissioner has reason to believe that a person has committed any offense specified in clause A, clause B, or clause C or clause D of subsection 1 of section 132. Now they have not stated the offense in this section, but they have connected it to some another section 132, that whatsoever offenses of mentioned in such clause will be the key offenses for which this commissioner will be having reason to believe that a person has committed any offense which is mentioned in those sections. Then he may by order authorize any officer of central tax. Now this section 69 is given in CGST and SGST Act. Both the language are same. Just in one section they have said that commissioner have power to empower central tax officer if we are talking about CGST Act, and in SGST Act they are saying that the power vests with the state tax, that commissioner can empower any state tax officer. Now subsection 2, which says that where a person is arrested under subsection 1 for the offense specified under subsection 5 of 132, the officer authorized to arrest the person shall inform such person of the grounds of arrest and produce him before the magistrate within 24 hours. After that, subsection 3 is there. Subsection 2, subject to the provision of CRPC, where a person is arrested under subsection 1 for any offense specified under subsection 4 of 132, he shall be admitted to bail or in default of bail forwarded to the custody of the magistrate. Then there is in another case, in the case of non-cognizable or bailable offense, the deputy commissioner or the assistant commissioner shall, for the purpose of releasing an arrested person on bail, have the same power and be subject to the same provisions as officer in charge of the police station. Now the key words which are being used in this is commissioner, who will be the jurisdictional authority to which is empowered to make an order for arrest. And then there is a problematic word which is being used, that is reason to believe, which is quite, I would say, is having a wide jurisprudence behind that. A lot of judgments are for this particular word, which is being used in section 69 as well, which is used in section 67, in which the inspection powers are being given to the commissioner. Or this section is used in income tax as well for initiating any income escapement proceedings. So this section is used in a lot of sections of different laws, and you see a lot of jurisprudence as well to prove, or I would say to say that how this commissioner is having such reason to believe. And then there is the word person. Who shall be that person who have committed the crime? There is a recent judgment as well on that. We'll see to that as well, that how that person, the word person, is being interpreted by the law. And then there are offenses which are given or mentioned in the section 132. They are specifically covered only 4 clauses, clause A, B, C, D of 132. And then they are saying that after making arrest, the person authorized will produce that person before the magistrate within 24 hours after the arrest, and then they have given the power of bail to the officer. We'll discuss about that bail power as well, and the problematic situation which is created between section 69 and 132 through this bail power. Now what is reason to believe? If we see from GST perspective, there was a case law of Gujarat High Court in Vimal Goswami versus State of Gujarat, in which it was said that reason to believe consists of 2 words, reason and to believe. The word reason means cause or justification, and the word believe means to accept as true or to have faith in it. Now therefore there must be justification for it, and belief is the result of mental exercise based on information received. The word reason to believe contemplates an objective determination based on intelligence, care and deliberation, involving judicial review as purely subjective consideration. Now you see, if we talk about reason to believe, see section 69, we'll have to understand that section 69, the commissioner is having power to arrest someone. So we must be exercising that reason to believe very carefully, that it's not basically a presumption, or I would say it's not basically if you want to justify it, so you must have a sufficient backing to that why the commissioner had reason to believe. Now you see in CRPC there must be reason to be recorded. So all these terms are same. So that's the same word which was emphasized by the High Court while reading out this particular section 69, which was given in Golden Cotton judgment as well, in which Gujarat High Court said that when we are reading the reason to believe, so you just prove that these reason to believe are sufficient. Now, as I stated in some another webinar as well, that reason to believe, when we are talking about reason to believe, it must be sufficient, and court can check the sufficiency of reason to believe. The court will not go into the merits that yes, this prove me this fact, prove me that fact. We are not talking about the merits of the case. We are saying just that these reasons to believe are sufficient to invoke this section or not. It's not that someone came to the officer and just handed over a piece of paper that yes, this person have committed a crime, and commissioner then made an order for arrest. This cannot be done. He must be exercising it. He must do some exercise that yes, why I should invoke this section. Now, the key section which is added with the section 69, because section 69 cannot be read like in isolation mode. So obviously 132, in which the clauses for which the arrest can be made are given. Now section starts with whoever commits or causes to commit and retain the benefits arising out of any of the following offense, namely. Now they have started that whoever commit. Okay, in 69 there is a word given person. They have not used the word any person. They have used the word person who is committing that thing. Now, in this section they have used the word whoever commit or causes to commit and retain the benefit. So three things are there: the person who is committing, or he is caused to commit, and if he is retaining the benefits as well. Now what would be the offenses which are mentioned in this? Clause A of section 132 1 subsection 1 says that supplies any goods or services or both without issue of any invoice in violation of provisions of this act or the rules made thereunder with the intention to evade tax. Two things are there: if he is supplying goods and he is not giving you the invoice, which is obviously a contravention or violation of this provision of this act, and his intention is to evade the tax. It's not that he made a mistake, it's that his intention was to evade the tax. Now clause B says that issues any invoice or bill without supply of goods or services or both in violation of the provision of the act or rules made thereunder leading to wrongful availment or utilization of ITC or refund of tax. Now this is something which is I would say very popular wrongdoing which are done by a lot of businessmen, in which they are issuing the invoice, but in actual there is no supply of goods or services, only the invoice is there just to take the credit or give the credit to the other party, or you are kind of making him in a position that he can avail the refund of that ITC. You see a lot of cases, or practically what we have seen is in cement industry or maybe in industry in which inverted duty structure is there. So in that cases, if they want to utilize the credit, so they are issuing invoice with a higher rate of tax, or maybe the party who is receiving the goods, who is a party who is having inverted duty structure. So that's how all these transactions are being designed, in which no actual transfer of goods, but yes, the invoice is there. The third is avail ITC using the invoice or bill referred to in clause B, or fraudulently avail ITC without any invoice or bill. Now third is something in which you are taking the credit but you're not having any bill or invoice. And D clause is there that if you collect any amount as tax but fails to pay the same to government beyond a period of 3 months from the date on which such payment becomes due. Now if you collect any amount, see, this is also a very I would say, practically I've seen a lot of people do not put emphasis on this clause D, because all the attention is taken by clause B only. If you see practically that all the circular trading are being center of attraction by the authorities. But yes, the clause D as well, that if you are collecting any tax and if you're not paying it within 3 months from the due date, then also you are under the radar of being arrested. Now they have used the word tax in this. Now what would be the meaning of tax? There is an explanation which is given to this, that for the purpose of this section, the term tax shall include the word amount tax evaded, or the amount of ITC wrongly availed or utilized, or refund. So they have included three things: tax, and then the amount of ITC, and then the refund as well. This is just for clarification purpose. Now you see, what is circular trading? This is a kind of word which you are hearing like a lot of news. You must be seeing that this person got arrested by this commissionerate, which was involved in a fake ITC racket. So what do you mean by circular trading? This is a word which means that circular trading refers to a transaction of selling or buying goods without actual movement of goods through shell companies. In that there is no actual movement, but only you are issuing the invoice just to pass on the credit, or just to pass on that benefit of credit, or maybe the making other person eligible for refund. Now, after understanding the circular trading, it is more important to understand the objective. Now, what would be the objective of circular trading? It can be to increase the valuation of the company. It can be to benefit higher loans from the banks or maybe any NBFCs, to bring black money back into the system, to making conversion of black money into the white money, and to avail the fake ITC. Now, all these provisions are covered in the clause B, which we just mentioned. Now, if we see the jurisprudence, or I would say the interpretation of word person, which is given in the definition under section 2 subsection 84, in which the word person is being defined. Now you see, if in a circular trading, if a person was having 4 to 5 firms, now you see in GST on a same PAN, if you are having separate registrations, it will be deemed, they are treated as deemed distinct entity, but they are at the end they are a separate registration. So if you are having separate registrations, and that threshold which is provided in these sections, like suppose it's not that you can be arrested only for 100 rupees crime as well. There is a threshold is also being given in the section. Now suppose there is a threshold of 1 crore which is given in the section, and you have made 4 forms, and in all the 4 forms the amount involved of fraud is less than 1 crore, but if you take the cumulative figure, it is more than 1 crore. I have designed the transaction accordingly, that so that if in future you get caught, so you will not be arrested on lack of that threshold limit. Now what would be the none in this high court said that in tax frauds, the modus operandi of creating fictitious entities to get around the rigors of law is not unknown. So court also know that a lot of people are doing this. They are making shell companies, they're making fake companies to just pass on these credits, and thoroughly relied upon the material available on record. Now the High Court ruled that offences had been committed warranting arrest only because multiple entities are created and run by a single individual for carrying out activities. Thus, obviously this petition was dismissed then, and bail was not granted. So you will not be given that benefit that if a person is having multiple registration on the same PAN and you say that that registration is different, so they will say the modus operandi as well, that in what structure you are operating actually through all these registrations. Now what would be the punishment? As I said that not every quantum of it, like suppose there must be a threshold which is given in this section, that yes, if you have done this much of fraud, then only the imprisonment or the prosecution will be there. Now this is given in section 132(1) only, that in case where the amount of tax evaded or the amount of ITC wrongly availed or utilized or the amount of fund wrongly taken which is exceeding rupees 500 lakhs, which is 5 crore rupees, imprisonment in that case would be 5 years, which may extend to 5 years and with fine. In second case, if the amount is between 2 crore and 5 crore, the imprisonment can be up to 3 years with fine. In case it is between 1 crore and 2 crore, the imprisonment which may extend up to 1 year. So there are three cases. If it is more than 5 crore, then the imprisonment may extend to 5 years with fine. If it is between 2 crore and 3 crore, sorry, 2 crore and 5 crore, I wrongly mentioned that, 2 crore and 5 crore, then it will be 3 years with fine. And if it is between 1 crore and 2 crore, then it will be 1 year. So that is the quantum of punishment, or I would say The time limit for imprisonment is being given in this section. Apart from that, there is a clause 4 as well, which says that in cases where he commits or abets the commission of an offence specified in clause F or clause G or clause J, he shall be punishable with imprisonment for a term which may extend to 6 months or with fine or both. Now I have not taken those clauses. See, there are 12 kind of offences which are mentioned in 132, in which only 4 offences which are covered by the section 69. You will see how this is interrelated, that when we see section 132 subsection 2, which says that where any person convicted of an offence under this section is again convicted, this is a second time offence. So for the second time or for every subsequent offence, there can be imprisonment up to 5 years. For second time offence, if you're doing the same transaction, or again if you get caught again for the same offence, then you'll get the imprisonment of up to 5 years with fine. Then we will not see that how much the quantum is. Then is there any minimum period of arrest as well? So the imprisonment referred in clause 1, 2, 3 of subsection 1 and subsection 2 shall, in absence of special and adequate reasons to the contrary, to be recorded in the judgment of court. If there are some special or adequate reasons, there can be some medical grounds or anything. So if some reasons are there, then you can go for a period less than 6 months. Otherwise, the minimum period of arrest would be the 6 months. So minimum period would be the 6 months, maximum 5 years. Then section 132 subsection 4 is there, which is saying that notwithstanding anything contained in the CRPC, all offences under this act except the offences referred to in subsection 5 shall be non-cognizable and bailable. Now they have said that which offences will be non-cognizable and bailable. Now the word non-cognizable and bailable will be taken care by Radhaji in her segment. Now what is given in section 132(5), it is mentioning that the offence specified in clause A or B, C, D of subsection 1 and punishable under clause 1 if they are having a quantum of more than 5 crore of that subsection shall be cognizable and non-bailable. Now you see, amount involved in the transaction or in this whole offence is more than 5 crore, and these offences are those offences which are mentioned in the section 69 as well, and the offences which I just quoted, that where you are supplying goods without invoice, or you are taking credit without invoice, or if you are supplying invoice without goods. So all these transactions, all these offences, only those 4 clauses which are mentioned in 132 or 69, those will be cognizable and non-bailable. They have mentioned it. Now what is the problematic situation is here between the non-cognizable and the powers of commissioner? We'll discuss it through a judgment of Andhra Pradesh High Court. But before that, there is another power which says that a person shall not be prosecuted for any offence under this section except with the previous sanction of commissioner. So they have emphasized that none of the person will be prosecuted unless you have a previous sanction of the commissioner for doing so. Now let me say, or let me sum up these 2 sections, that till now we have seen that there are 12 kind of offences which are mentioned in 132. Let me take it from a reverse perspective. There are some offences which are mentioned in 132, but the power of arrest which is given in section 69. Now in section 69, only 4 offences out of those 12 offences are being covered, and they have said that if the quantum exceeds more than 5 crores, then all those offences become cognizable and non-bailable. Now what is the problem? If you say, you will see that there is no problem in that, but what about the power of commissioner for bailable offences, for non-cognizable or bailable offences? So this section is quite unclear about that the commissioner is empowered to do so or not, because in section 69 they said that these 4 clauses in which the commissioner can order for arrest. Now on a second part, if you see that those offences are exceeding the amount of more than 5 crore, so those offences become cognizable and non-bailable at that time. So what about the power wherein the offences which are non-cognizable or bailable, how that power is being empowered to the commissioner? That is being problematic because they have mentioned about the non-bailable offences, but they have not mentioned about the bailable offences. But the power is being given to the deputy commissioner or assistant commissioner to act as a police, as a SHO who will be empowered to give the bail. In bailable offence, he will be given the power of policeman who is empowered to give the bail in a bailable offence. You see, there is a procedure to get bail, in which you get the bail from police station itself. So that power is being given to that, but they have not cleared about that ultimate power or the wide power of arresting a person in a bailable offence. So is that power is vesting with the commissioner or not? We are still unclear about that. Now there is a judgment of Andhra Pradesh High Court in PV Ramana Reddy, which is quite of a landmark judgment. If you see the arrest provisions, almost every provisions or every problem which is between 69 and 132 was taken care in this section, this particular case law. And probably one of the judgments which have gone to Supreme Court. Now what was the problem in this case law? It says that Section 69 subsection 1 provides power to the commissioner to make arrest if the offence is cognizable and bailable. But however, the power to make arrest and for non-cognizable and bailable offence is unknown. Now if you see the section 69(3), which gives the power of granting bail to assistant commissioner or deputy commissioner to release the accused in case of non-cognizable and bailable offence. So that's why I'm saying they have given the power to release that person on the order of assistant commissioner or deputy commissioner in non-cognizable or bailable offence, but they have not given that power of arresting. They have given the power of bail. So will that be deemed that the commissioner is empowered to arrest or make order for bailable offence as well? There is no clarity in the law as of now. Now another problem which exists between section 69(1) or 2, which deals with the power of arrest and the production before magistrate in a case of cognizable and non-bailable offences. Now there were some facts involved in this case. This case is quite a detailed one. I would request if you can read this judgment fully in its whole manner. I have taken out only the important aspects of it. Now when this matter reached to the Supreme Court, what were the key observations from that judgment? First of all, you see there is a provision of summon, if giving a summon in GST. That is a section 70 subsection 1, which empowers an officer of GST to send a summon or to call upon any person for any information related to any inquiry which is going on. And then there is a section 69. Now suppose if you have summoned any person under section 71, does it give you a deemed power, or does it give a deemed power to that officer to arrest that person as well? So this was clear through this judgment, that a person who is summoned under section 70 of the Act and the person whose arrest is authorized under section 69(1) of the Act are not to be treated as person accused of that any offence until a prosecution is launched. See, both sections work differently. If you are giving summon to any person, or commissioner is empowering to make order for arrest that person, both are different. You cannot say that a person against whom an inquiry is undertaken under the relevant provision of tax laws, it does not automatically become a person accused of that offence until the prosecution is launched. Two things are there: assessment and prosecution. There might be a lot of judgments which says that both can run parallelly. So section 70, summon which is related to your judicial proceedings, but section 69 which is related to criminal proceedings. So if officer is giving summon to anyone, it will not be deemed that you have initiated the prosecution proceedings as well. Since 70, someone is to collect the or gather the information from that person. You cannot arrest that person, or it cannot be deemed that the prosecution is also being invoked through initiating the summon proceedings. So you cannot do that. You have to initiate those prosecution proceedings through these sections. If that offense is covered under 132, then the power that the commissioner is having reason to believe, all those things needed to be provided or reason to be recorded for that in a well manner. Now that the statement made by the person in course of inquiries under the tax laws cannot be equated to statements made by person accused of an offense. That I said that whatever statements you are making in section 70 in summon proceedings cannot be said that those proceedings, or I would say those statements, cannot be taken as an evidence or cannot be taken as a equated statements which you supposed to make in a criminal proceedings. Both things are different. Both things to be differently initiated. Assessments at the same time you can make the assessment, and if that person is a kind of a eligible person to get arrested, then that eligibility will be seen differently. And apart from that, there is I would say there are a lot of contrary judgments related to this particular power which is given to the officer or maybe the GST officer, that how procedure is being not followed, or they are wrongdoing with the person to whom they are arresting. So the whole procedure will be dealt in our next segment. So then court at last said that hence such a person cannot enjoy the benefit of Article 23 of Constitution, which says that no person accused of any offense shall be compelled to be a witness against himself. So a person obviously cannot become a witness against himself. So this is quite a relevant judgment when we read about arrest provisions in GST. Now apart from that, there are few key points which I want to highlight before Radha initiates her segment. Is now there are certain provisions which are given in CRPC, be it like 41A. When CRPC got amended in 2008, they introduced some safeguards related to search or maybe to the arrest. Now, are those safeguards provided in the GST law? No. Is there any procedure of arrest? No. Apart from that, there are few provisions in CRPC related to pre-arrest protection. Now, can I say that pre-arrest protection, which can be taken through anticipatory bail, is that my right? Now, court have said this many times that this is not my right under Article 14, 19 or 21. Apart from that, what would be the High Court jurisdiction to take the cases, whether under Article 226 in which you go to the High Court for writ, whether that proceeding will be treated as anticipatory bail proceedings or how that interplays. So for getting the better understanding what happens after the arrest or what would be the procedure of arrest, so I have given you the outlay of that yes, these are the provisions and this is how it is done, or these are the offenses for which it is done, but how it is supposed to get done. Now how they are doing is not relevant, because we also know that they are not following the procedure, be it police or be it GST authorities. They are not following the procedure all the time. So for that, I would request Radha to initiate her part.
Thank you so much, Navjot. It was definitely a very technical and a wonderful session. I am glad to now take over the whole procedure as to how the whole arrest is to be conducted, what are the do's and don'ts that the assessees need to follow, and what are the do's and don'ts that the officers of the department need to follow, and that we need to ensure that they have been followed. So I will start the session by explaining what are the classification of offenses. So basically, the normal procedure of arrest is that a magistrate takes cognizance of a matter after considering the merits of any case. If the magistrate, it is for the magistrate to decide whether it is a fit case to launch prosecution on a person or not. However, in certain situations, the offenses are so severe that the time lost in asking the magistrate to take cognizance or going to the magistrate with an application can severely affect the complainant and may even jeopardize him. And therefore, in such a situation where the offense is of such severe nature, then the officers itself are empowered to make an arrest. And in such cases where the officer can take cognizance of an offense, the offenses are known as cognizable offenses. Thus, a cognizable offense is an offense as specified under the Act, which we'll be discussing in further detail, in which GST officer can arrest the convict without a warrant and can start investigation without the permission of the court. Whereas in case of a non-cognizable offense, the police officer or the GST officer, as in our case, cannot conduct the arrest of the accused without a warrant, as well as cannot start the investigation without the permission of the court. In this type of crimes, the criminal complaint is lodged with the metropolitan magistrate, who is supposed to order the concerned authority to initiate an investigation. Cognizable offenses, being severe in nature, are non-bailable, whereas non-cognizable offenses are bailable. Now, the word bailable does not mean that a bail can never be granted. It means that a bail can be granted, but not by the officer making the arrest, but by the metropolitan magistrate by following a certain procedure of law. So, whenever we say that it is an unbailable offense, even then bail can be obtained, but not by the officer who has made the arrest. For seeking bail, you will have to go to the magistrate to ask for a bail, and on payment of a bail bond, the magistrate can, if he thinks fit, give a bail to you. If a person is held under a non-bailable offense, he cannot claim grant of bail as a matter of right. But the law gives special consideration in favor of granting bail when an accused is, say, under 16, or a woman, or sick, or infirm, or if the court is satisfied that it is just and proper for any other special reason to give a bail rather than to refuse it. So basically, the courts will always be in the favor of giving bail, because this is a pre-trial stage and the offense has not yet been confirmed and not yet been proved upon the accused. And therefore, in such a situation, keeping the assessee under custody is only for the purpose of ensuring his attendance in the matter of trial. So, just to ensure that a person will appear as and when the trial is conducted, you need not keep such a person in the custody, and he may be asked to, he may be left on bail if he promises to come up for every hearing in the course of trial. Now, what are these so-called severe offenses? As we discussed earlier, bailable offenses are non-severe, and non-bailable offenses and cognizable offenses are the offenses in which the officer himself can take cognizance because the offense is of such serious nature. So now, what exactly are these serious offenses? As discussed by my friend Navjot, the offenses where the amount of tax evaded or input tax credit wrongly availed or utilized or refund wrongly taken is in excess of rupees 5 crore, including one of the following. First, supply without issue of invoice so as to evade tax. Second, issue of invoice without supply for utilizing wrongful ITC. And third is utilizing ITC for utilizing ITC on such supply, which are allegedly called as bogus supplies. And lastly, collecting but not paying to the government within 3 months of collecting of the tax. All these situations will be classified as cognizable offenses, where the officer itself can take cognizance and will be non-bailable. Bail can be obtained only by from the magistrate or any court above him. Now, what is culpable mental state? Culpable mental state means a guilty state of mind. Under the GST Act,
such a guilty state of mind is assumed with respect to the defaulting assessee. Wherever an assessee has committed default, it will be assumed that the default has been committed with an intention to commit that crime and with that intention to evade taxes. And it is not, and it is for the assessee to prove that there was no such mental state. The assessee is not just supposed to prove, but he has to prove it beyond reasonable doubt that there was no culpable mental state and that the crime was not done intentionally. Now let us see what happens when a company commits such an offense and how prosecution and arrest provisions apply in this case, as company cannot itself be put into a jail. So when a company or a firm, this section's heading is offenses by a company, but it actually applies to all forms of organizations such as firm, company, HUF, trusts, etc. So when a company or a firm or trust or HUF commits any offense under this act, every person who was in charge of the business functioning of the company or firm or trust or HUF at that time will be proceeded against along with the company itself. For example, directors, partners, karta of the HUF will all be prosecuted along with the company. Moreover, where an offense is committed with the consent of or collusion with or on account of negligence of any of the officer, director, manager, secretary, or any other officer of the company, then such a person shall also be deemed as guilty of that offense and shall be proceeded against along with the company. So the first part of this section was that the director, HUF hoga to karta, partner, etc. All these people who are in charge of that organization will be prosecuted. And the second part of this section says that not only can they prosecute a person in charge, but they can also prosecute any person if they find that such person was in collusion with or has deliberately helped in committing or has himself committed such an offense. So for taking cognizance of an offense under this act, the officer taking cognizance has to take a prior approval of the commissioner. Only on obtaining a sanction from the commissioner can the authority initiate prosecution proceedings against any assessee. Also, the offense can be tried by the magistrate of the first class only and not by any of the other authorities below him. The department in no case can try any of the offenses under prosecution, and only the chief metropolitan magistrate of the first class is allowed to try such an offense under GST. Now let us see what is compounding provisions of GST. It is very common that whenever prosecution is launched on any of the assessees, people usually tend to go towards compounding. So let us now understand what are these compounding procedures. Only the commissioner has the power to compound any offense under this act, and compounding could either be before institution of prosecution or after its institution. The assessee can make an application for compounding of an offense in form CPD 1, and then the commissioner examines the form and issues the hearing notice to the prosecution. On hearing both the parties, the commissioner may, by order in form CPD 2, allow the application and ask the assessee to pay the quantified amount of compounding fees or reject the application within 90 days as he may think fit. No application shall be rejected without granting the applicant or the prosecution an opportunity of being heard, and the procedure of natural justice shall be duly followed. Within 30 days of the date of receipt of order in form CPD 2, the assessee has to make payment of the compounding fees as directed, and unless this is done, the application shall become invalid. So whenever you receive the form CPD 2 quantifying the amount of compounding fees that are to be paid, the said fee payment has to be done within 30 days, and the challan of such payment is then to be submitted to the commissioner, and it is only after then that the compounding procedure shall be complete. Otherwise, the whole compounding procedure will be declared as invalid. It is also important to note that compounding of an offense in this way shall grant the SSE immunity only under this act, and all other proceedings against him shall continue to apply in all other cases. For example, if the same kind of offense is attracting any penalty or prosecution under Income Tax Act, then those proceedings shall not abate, and this will apply only for in case of GST and in respect of this issue. Let us now discuss the compounding fees. The compounding fees are not specific as such, and it is up to the discretion of the commissioner as to what will be the actual amount of compounding fee. But the minimum limit shall be 50% of the tax involved or 10,000, whichever is higher. And the maximum compounding fee could be 150% of the tax involved or rupees 30,000, whichever is higher. So this is a very huge gap, and a very broad spectrum is given here, wherein the compounding fees can range from 50% of the tax involved or 10,000, whichever is higher, to a maximum of 150% of the tax involved or 50,000, whichever is higher. On compounding of the offence in such manner, no further proceedings shall be initiated under this act against the accused in respect of the same offence for the same period, and if already initiated, all these proceedings shall stand abated. So the immunity granted by way of such compounding shall be withdrawn if the person had concealed any material particulars or had given false particulars. If it is found by the commissioner that compounding has been obtained on account of false documentation or on misrepresentation, then the commissioner has the power to withdraw such immunity, and compounding shall not affect any other proceedings in any other law. However, not all offences can be allowed to be compounded. Compounding is a one-time opportunity given to the assessee to make up for all the offences that he has been committed. And therefore, offences which are not allowed to be compounded are, firstly, committing, aiding, or abating an offence specified in section A to F of section 1 of section 132, subsection 1 of section 132, where the charged person has already compounded the said offence. These are the offences which we were talking as severe offences, or the offences which were cognizable by the officer. And therefore, in such cases where he has already compounded these offences once, the assessee shall not be allowed to compound it. Then secondly, offences where the value of supply is more than 1 crore and the person has been allowed to compound earlier. In such situation, the person shall not be allowed to compound again. Then this could be any type of offences, doesn't have to be the severe offences that we had discussed earlier. Any type of offence where the amount of tax evaded is more than 1 crore, the person shall not be allowed to compound again. Then the offence that the assessee is accused of is also an offence in any other act. Even in this case, compounding shall not be allowed. For example, where an offence is an offence in GST as well as, say, IPC or income tax. If the offence is also an offence in some other act, then he shall not be allowed to compound. Next, a person who has already been convicted of an offence under this act, meaning there are multiple offences committed by him under the GST Act, then he will not be allowed to compound. And when a person obstructs or prevents any officer in the discharge of his duties under this Act, or tampers or destroys with any material evidences or document, or fails to supply any information, if the offence is of such category, then he will not be allowed to compound, and any other activity as may be specified. So, say for example, after all these procedures, your client has been finally arrested. So we will now discuss what is the procedure for arrest, what are the rights of the arrestees, and what all can be done if a person has already been arrested. So, the procedure for arrest, arrestee has certain rights that have been given to it under the GST Act, under the IPC, under Constitution, etc. So some of these rights are right to know the grounds of arrest. Right to know the grounds of arrest, and not just the ground, but the exact charge on which the accused has been prosecuted. This provision sounds very easy, but it is of great importance in practical life. The courts have recognized that in order to be able to defend the charge properly, the accused must know exactly what the charge is, so that he can decide as to what is supposed to be exactly defended. For example, if I have not been given, for example, if a summons has been issued and it is issued in the name of a company itself and not without naming any particular officer, then in that case, the company is to decide as to who is to go in case of appearance for such summons. What the company can now decide is the company has to decide as to which officer is to be sent for appearing in such summons. So if the company is not adequately provided the charge and the exact matter is not informed to the company, then company will not be in a position to decide as to who it is supposed to send, which type of technical expertise will be required for answering such summons. And if the same is not provided to the company, then the company will not be able to defend itself properly. This controversy has seen a lot of glamour under the Income Tax Act, and especially where the assessing officer issues a show cause notice without specifying the charge and initiates penalty under Section 271(1)(c), that is penalty for concealment of income or furnishing of inaccurate particulars of income. This section, as we all know, has two limbs. Firstly, concealment of income and furnishing of inaccurate particulars of income. In cases where the charge was not clear, the assessees have taken a view that had I known the charge properly, I would have defended my case in a better way and with a better approach. And hence, where the charge was not clear in the show cause notice itself, the entire proceedings were held to be non-est in a number of judgments. Just as a matter of academic interest, I suggest that all the professionals read the recent judgment delivered by the Constitutional Bench of the Bombay High Court, delivered by Justice Sri Damasheshadri Naidu, which has beautifully discussed the whole issue, almost ending the controversy around this topic. Moving on, the next right is the right to be informed about law relating to the process of bail. The accused needs to specifically know as to what is the procedure of bail and that he has the right to opt for bail. Next is the right to be presented before the magistrate within 24 hours as guaranteed by Article 22(2). Thus, many people are not exactly aware about this right, and where a person is not presented before the magistrate within 24 hours of his arrest, in such a situation, the whole prosecution proceedings could be challenged by way of a writ petition, and such prosecution proceedings can be held as non-est. The next right is the right to free trial, free legal aid, where the accused is unable to afford an advocate. Where the accused has no connection with an advocate, then it is for the officers to grant them free legal aid, and no person should be convicted unheard, and therefore it is the right of the accused to have his case represented by an advocate. There are certain guidelines laid down in the very celebrated judgment of D.K. Basu versus State of West Bengal, where the guidelines have been laid down stating how to arrest and how an arrest is to be conducted. The guidelines include right to meet with his attorney, the right to inform a friend, relative about his arrest, the right to be examined by a medical practitioner, right to have a memorandum of arrest witnessed by a member of the family. I will talk about what exactly is the memorandum of arrest, but it is a very important provision which lays down that the memorandum of arrest should be signed by one person of his family. He has the right to ask for that. Then the right to medical examination every 48 hours. right to have copies of all documents submitted to the magistrate, and majorly a right to be informed that the accused has all these rights. Then there are certain specific provisions relating to arrest. Some special provisions are that where a person is about to be arrested, forcibly resists such an arrest, then the officer may use all possible force and means to arrest that person, and thus resorting to any such behavior is not advisable under law. Secondly, our own Bollywood movies have always taught us that women cannot be arrested after sunset or before sunrise. This is what we have learned from almost all the courtroom dramas that we see. So this is very well true. But in exceptional circumstances, a woman police officer can obtain a prior permission of the judicial magistrate of the first class and make an arrest of a woman after sunset or before sunrise, where the offense is of such severe nature and where the arrest is called for so urgently. Once a person is arrested, the next process is to apply for bail. So what exactly is bail? Basically, a temporary release of an accused person before trial, usually on a condition that a sum of money is to be paid to guarantee that he will regularly appear before the court as and when the hearing comes up. The Supreme Court, in a landmark judgment of Rajasthan versus Bhalchand Balia, has laid down that bail is a rule and jail is an exception. Yeah. So the Rajasthan High Court has specifically laid down that bail is a rule and jail is an exception. Pre-trial bail is granted keeping in mind that the reason behind the arrest is to make sure that the accused appears before the court for each hearing of the trial, and not so as to torture any accused or to create any deterrence. Therefore, if the presence of the accused can be guaranteed without detaining such a person in the course of trial, then it might be unjust and violative of his right to liberty to keep him under custody, and therefore a person must usually be released on bail after paying a sort of security deposit by way of a bail bond, so that he assures that he shall present himself during the whole process of the trial. Thus, during the pendency of a trial, bail is to be mandatorily given in case of a bailable offense, and in case of a non-bailable offense, considering that the offense is of a severe nature, the court has the discretion to decide whether or not bail is to be granted to an accused. A person who is detained by the GST officers can be retained for further interrogation and investigation. The process of keeping a person in custody for future interrogation before the conviction process is known as remand, where the police officer and in this case GST officer arrests a person on suspicion of a crime without a warrant, that is in case of a cognizable offense, and the investigation is not completed within 24 hours of such arrest, then they need to present that person before the magistrate within 24 hours, and that is before the 24 hours have been completed. The GST officer shall forward all the relevant documents to the magistrate, who will examine these documents. The magistrate can further extend the detention period of 15 days of the accused if he is convinced that there are adequate grounds for taking this discretion. He may even further extend it. If even after extension, suppose the investigation has not been completed, then in such a case, the arrestee has to be released. Now, what is anticipatory bail? Anticipatory bail is the discretion to release a person on bail issued even before the person is arrested. It is only issued by the Sessions Court and the High Court. And it is a process whereby I anticipate that suppose a search has been conducted in my case, and I anticipate that an offense involving tax of more than 5 crore will be conducted, and I am apprehensive that the GST authorities will convict me for an offense so severe that it will be a non-bailable and a cognizable offense. Then in such a case, I can go to the High Court even before the search is complete, even before the prosecution is launched, and I can ask for an anticipatory bail, stating that I am anticipating that an offense will be lodged on me, and in that case I will be arrested, and therefore I am asking for a bail beforehand so that I am not arrested at all in the first place. Now let us understand these procedures by way of certain judicial precedents. We know that GST prosecution has been becoming more and more common by each passing day, and therefore the courts have lashed out heavily on various officers and have given out various guidelines stating as what ought and what ought not be done in situations where arrest has taken place. Arbitrary arrests are highly condemned by these courts, and they have laid down various guidelines that we will now learn in greater detail. Firstly, I would like to discuss a case of Confident Projects Private Limited. It is a case in the facts of an income tax prosecution, which lays down certain important parameters that can very well be applied to GST prosecution as well. The question that arises in case of defaults by companies is, can the directors of the company be automatically prosecuted for any violation under the Act? The answer is obviously no. Not all partners can be prosecuted for any offense committed by the company. There needs to be a specific allegation, and the allegation should lead to an inference that an offense has been committed because of these allegations, and all of this is for the department to prove. What happens usually in bailable and non-cognizable offenses under GST and income tax is that they find that a company or a partnership firm or a trust or HUF has committed a certain crime, and what they do next is that they launch a complaint on all the directors and all the partners and karta of the HUF without even seeing whether he was actually involved in such a offense. So against this arbitrary behavior, the Karnataka High Court in this judgment has recorded that the magistrate has to make sure that each and every person on whom the complaint has been filed is involved in the offense, and on going through the materials before him, in case of a non-cognizable offense, the magistrate has to record his satisfaction that it is a fit case to launch prosecution. The Karnataka High Court in this judgment recorded that mere words that materials perused and cognizance taken are not enough, as it does not depict application of mind to indicate that requirement of sufficient grounds for proceedings in terms of section 204 of the CRPC has been complied with. 204 of CRPC says that there should be sufficient grounds for the magistrate to initiate prosecution, and therefore the magistrate, while passing an order taking cognizance, has to specifically write down as to what was the offense committed by the particular director. Suppose there are 3 directors, then the magistrate is supposed to write down in case of all 3 directors as to what was his lack, as to what was his negligence, or what was his particular deed that has led to committing of the offense by the company. The Metropolitan Magistrate should record a satisfaction that from the materials on record, a case is brought out to initiate the prosecution proceedings. The order of cognizance cannot be in a standard format and cannot be passed in a mechanical way. Moreover, when there are multiple accused, the order is required to be disclosed, and application of mind should be seen from the order of cognizance of the magistrate and how he has led to believe that offense has been committed by each of the directors. Secondly, when an accused resides beyond the jurisdiction of the Metropolitan Magistrate, it is required that the magistrate should conduct a mandatory inquiry as to why such a person he thinks has been involved in this particular offense. if the person resides within the within the jurisdiction of the magistrate, say for example, a company is registered in Mumbai and one of its directors is in, say, Delhi, and a prosecution is launched on a company in Mumbai along prosecuting all the directors of the company, irrespective of the fact where the directors usually reside. So in such a case where a person is supposed to be asked to come all the way from Delhi to here, the magistrate is supposed to conduct a special inquiry or cause to be done a special inquiry under his instructions, and then decide as to whether really is the presence of such a person required and whether such person shall be prosecuted. And therefore, where a person lives beyond the jurisdiction of the magistrate, we as professionals should first ensure that a special inquiry has been conducted by the magistrate, and only after that can the magistrate take cognizance of that offense. Now let us come to the judgment of Arnesh Kumar versus State of Bihar, where the Supreme Court, it is a famous case law in context of CRPC, which is commonly used in GST law as well, and has been cited in various case laws under the GST law. By this judgment, the Supreme Court lashed out on the authorities who casually initiated arrest without proper initial investigations. It strictly laid down that no arrest should be made on the basis of an offense being a non-bailable and a cognizable offense. It also laid down that the duties of the magistrate should be carried out in a proper way and should be strictly followed. The apex court said that the procedure of procedures of arrest are to be followed strictly, and moreover, it is in this judgment, it is said that it will also apply to all matters where offense is punishable with an imprisonment for a term which may be less than 7 years or which may extend to 7 years with or without fine. And therefore, it squarely applies to almost all the cases under GST and income tax also, and the ratio of this judgment can very well be applied in our cases. The court heavily came down upon the arresting authorities, and they said that arrest brings out humiliation, curtails freedoms, and casts scars forever. Lawmakers know it, so also the police. There is a battle between the lawmakers and the police, and it seems that the police have not learned their lesson. The lesson implicit and embodied in CRPC, it has not come out of its colonial damage despite of 6 decades of independence. It is largely considered as a tool of harassment operation, and surely is not considered as friend of the public. The need for caution in exercising the drastic powers of arrest, as can be emphasized from time to time again by the courts, but has not yielded desired results. Power to arrest greatly contributes to its arrogance. So also the success of the police sources of police corruption. The attitude to arrest first and then proceed with the arrest is despicable. It has become a handy tool for the police officers who lack sensitivity or act with oblique motive. Thus, the Supreme Court has beautifully laid down that these are not casual provisions. These need to be followed with utmost care, and each and every procedure is to be followed with extreme care. And therefore, the Supreme Court judgment in this case can be easily relied upon in most of our cases. Now, this is one case that has already been discussed by my friend in case of Vimal Yashwant Giri Goswami, but I am trying to cover the other aspects of which Navjot has not already covered. So, in Vimal Yashwant Giri Goswami, the Honorable Gujarat High Court stated that arrest memo is a crucial document. So, basically, what is an arrest memo? An arrest memo is a document prepared at the time of arrest that is supposed to record every single detail, such as the name of the arrested person, the time of arrest, date and place of arrest, along with reasons for the arrest, and what the suspected offense is. It should record details like bodily marks at the time of arrest, what has been done about the belongings of the assessee, if they were confiscated or handed over to his family. All these little details are supposed to be recorded in the arrest memo, and it has to be signed by the police, two independent witnesses, which could be our neighbors, etc., and the arrested person himself, in order to ensure that the memo is accurately detailed and all the facts have been brought on record. So whenever a person, an officer, a GST officer comes for arrest, he will make an arrest memo, and what we have to do is that we have to carefully go through each and everything that has been given in the arrest memo. It should include all facts, right from the things such as bodily injuries, if already any, etc. All these can be then this arrest memo can then be used as a proof in case of any ill treatment has been taken place with the arrestee in the course of the investigation. It is very important to check the date and time of arrest as entered by the police or the officers on the arrest memo before signing it. And if the police or the officer detain an arrested person for more than 24 hours before producing him or her to the magistrate, the arrest memo will be a proof of such misconduct. The time of arrest should be specifically checked because from that will the period of 24 hours start within which the accused is to be taken to the magistrate. The Gujarat High Court in this decision held that the arrest memo is where the arrest memo is improperly filed, the magistrate should decline the production of the arrested person, and thus the arrest memo is a key safeguard against illegal arrests. The court also held that arrest cannot be used as a tool for harassment of the taxpayers. The commissioner has to justify as to why he thought that he had to resort to arrest and why he thought that the accused couldn't have been called upon to produce and submit documents and to explain his case, and why it was important to keep him and retain him in the judicial custody. One thing that the court recorded, which might majorly go, however, against the assessee, is that the court said that adjudication proceedings and criminal prosecution cannot be, and criminal prosecution are independent in nature, and hence, if the both are permissible, they can be initiated simultaneously. It has been consistent argument of the assessees that before conclusion of my assessment, it cannot be determined as to what is the exact amount of tax evaded or exact amount of ITC that has been wrongly credited, and the exact nature of my offense cannot be exactly brought out before the completion of the assessment. And therefore, the assessees consistently prayed that prosecution could be launched only after the assessment had been completed. However, unfortunately enough, there are various case laws in GST now which specifically state that arrest and assessment are two different proceedings and that both can be instituted simultaneously. Thus, all the contentions that prosecution cannot be initiated unless the assessment is complete and the liability is determined will now fail because of this judgment. But now a lot more, also a lot of courts have now held the same, and therefore it is more or less a settled law now. Unless there is a major relief on merits, the prosecution proceedings will not be affected. For example, after the conclusion of the assessment, if it is determined that the amount of offense is not of amount exceeding 5 crore, say it is only 2 crore, then in such cases, these are the factors that will majorly affect the prosecution proceedings. And therefore, in such a situation, maybe it will have a bearing on the prosecution proceedings. But otherwise, more or less, the prosecution proceedings will not be affected. as the authorized officers are not police officers, the statements made before them in the course of inquiry are not inadmissible under Section 25 of the Evidence Act. Thus, these can very well be used against the assessee in the course of the trial, and therefore it needs to be specifically seen as to what statements the arrestee is giving in front of these officers. However, you can later on, if suppose coercion has been used or undue influence has been used inflicted upon the arrestee and certain statements have been made to be recorded, then in such a situation, once the assessee is out of the custody, he can immediately approach and file a retraction affidavit and state that whatever has been stated there has been stated under coercion and has been stated under undue influence, because of which he should not be prosecuted, and because of which all these statements should not be held against him. So whenever such a thing happens, that is, if you are ever put in a situation where you have been made to give certain statements, immediately post such an experience, an affidavit needs to be filed, and it needs to be declared that whatever has been declared earlier has been declared under pressure or under mental torture. The commissioner is not entitled to produce the copy of the reasons recorded. This has been specifically laid down in this case law, that the commissioner is not entitled to give me the reasons of the copy of the reasons for which I have been prosecuted. However, when he is called upon before the magistrate to prove as to what led him to believe that I should be prosecuted, in that case, he is supposed to submit these reasons to the magistrate, and he is supposed to prove as to what exactly led him to believe and what led him to record these reasons. The magistrate should first be satisfied that the reasons for arrest were genuine and that they were based on concrete materials. The court specifically held that it is high time that the GST department prescribes a standardized format for the arrest memo. The format must contain all the mandatory requirements and necessary additions. The gist of the offense alleged to have been committed must also be incorporated in the arrest memo. It would be duty of the concerned magistrate to check that the arrest memo has been prepared and duly filed. Thus, arrest memo needs to be checked properly, and it needs to be in proper format, and we should make sure that every single detail should be brought on record on the arrest memo itself, as it is the very initial document that can be proved as that can be used as a vital evidence in the further prosecution proceedings to come. This is one case law that has been circulating amongst the professional. It is C. Pradeep versus Commissioner of GST and Central Excise, Salem, and another special leave to appeal. Okay, it is a special leave petition. Why this order? The assessee argued that against the assessment order, had I preferred an appeal before the appellate authority, I would have been made to pay 10% of the disputed amount, and I would have been granted stay on all the proceedings. And therefore, instead of me filing an appeal, I am ready to pay 10% of the disputed demand right now. And against this, the assessee asked the Honorable High Court to grant him stay. And the High Court has done it. And via the interim order, the Supreme Court has granted protection from coercive actions on deposit of 10% of the disputed GST amount. However, this is not a concluded case, and this is still an interim order. And I wonder how this can be used as a general case to say that on 10% of on payment of 10% of GST, interim protection shall be granted. I think this is a very risky proposition, but can be used, and this case law is a very good case law that can be used for obtaining at least the interim protection. The result of this case law is finally being awaited, and let us see what the court has to finally decide in this case. So that is the end of presentation from my side. But I would like to conclude on certain points that the prosecution proceedings under the GST prosecution provisions under GST are very harsh. So one has to be extra careful while doing their everyday transactions. One has to be constantly vigilant about your rights. In case of any invasion of any rights, one has to be vigilant enough to take legal help and ask for help from the courts, so that such coercive measures would not be taken against the assessees. The assessees should be well guided, because they cannot be. These are taxpayers. These are not criminals. The way these GST officers are prosecuting people, I don't think is a right thing to do. But what we can do is that we can be more vigilant in our ways. We can be more informed about what are the recent case laws. We can be more informed about how a business is to be done, what is to be done and what is not to be done, what practices are to be refrained from. All of these are important points for consideration, and I think with a good knowledge of law, we will all be able to sustain these difficult provisions. Thank you very much for the patient hearing. Thank you very much for the nice introduction. It was a great pleasure speaking for all of you. And thanks a lot again. Thank you.
Thank you, Radhaji, for the wonderful deliberation. Navjot, are you carrying forward? Okay, so fine. So basically, hope you all have enjoyed today's deliberation. If there are any queries, right now is the time you can ask our experts on their opinion, and we can take up the queries and move further. So you can write all your concerns in the chat box so that they can read and respond back.
I think there is a question from Mr. Parag. He says, how will the case law proceed for section 13.8, that is intermediary services? Can you elaborate? Yeah, about this, the section is very harsh. It says any person. It doesn't really mean a person who's a director, a person who's a partner, and it could say, and it means any person. And therefore, even an intermediary in this case can be brought under this purview, and this case law can help even that person, according to me.
And apart from that, 3 points which are quite important in arrest provisions, and on which we need a strict intervention of Supreme Court when the bench will be hearing a few of the matters in which constitutional provisions are being challenged, like constitutional validity of provisions of arrest being challenged. First one is the power of commissioner with respect to arrest in case of non-cognizable offences or the bailable offences. So that should be clear. Apart from that, clarity related to pre-arrest protection, or maybe they should come up with more guidelines related to safeguards which are provided to the assessees. Because since you see all the safeguards are in respect of GST authorities only, we have come to a stage wherein we are treating the assessee who have done the fraud of tax fraud or who have charged with the sedition law are being treated at the same, I would say, provision. So this should be taken care of in future, and we hope that it will be taken care of by the Supreme Court of India.
Yeah, I hope to see the judgments in the near.
Rather, Parag ji is asking.
One more question.
Yes, he is asking.
Just a minute, I'll get back. There's one more question by Ranganathan Ravichandran. He asked whether case laws applicable to IT Act hold good for GST Act and as far as prosecution provisions are concerned. Yes, I think wherever they have laid down a particular law in respect of arrest, etc., in those cases, we can very well say that the case laws can apply to GST as well as income tax, because basically what we see is that we even use cases from CRPC which relate to IPC, etc. also. So wherever a law point has been laid down, it can be easily said that the cases can be used in other laws as well. Whether a person on bail can commit any other civil or crime unknowingly. Okay. So anyone can, yeah, maybe he can commit, but it will not be ideal, obviously, and he can be arrested again in case of uh, such an instance.
Suman Kumarji is asking, department issued notice without third party investigation. Is it valid? So, Suman Kumarji, under what section that notice is being issued? Is it a summon or show cause notice? How it is there? Because mostly I see a bank attachments or the arrest provisions in which the person who is kind of helping the person who have actually committed the crime is also taken into the category of the I would say the list of category and on which the arrest provisions can be invoked, and department is doing that, especially when we see inspection or bank attachment cases. So they have taken all these categories into the list, whomsoever is helping that person. So please tell me under what section this notice is being issued. So Faraz is saying that I'm referring to a case where both judges having separate views. Sir, I think this matter is listed before Chief Justice of Bombay High Court. Now, whatsoever he'll be deciding, so then a final judgment will come. Then you must be seeing that there are judgments with a 2:1. So obviously, a judge can dissent from other judges. That's his right, and then matter can probably go to Supreme Court. But in if we see the views by Justice Abhay Ahuja, those are quite harsh, I would say. The points he have taken related to intermediary is quite being, I would say, is the old school provisions. So that provision should be seen in a wider perspective, and CBIC also should come with a clear circular regarding to intermediary, because since we have seen a lot of judgments now, or a lot of advanced rulings as well in this regard, which are quite creating a chaos now. Anirudh is asking, please describe about evasion value for determining the arrest. So the minimum amount for which the arrest can be made is 1 crore. At least 1 crore should be there. Maximum, there is no limit, obviously. But yes, minimum amount is 1 crore. Gurpreet ji asking, Gurpreet is asking, it may be proved that latter offence was not committed. Rather, would you like to answer this? If it is proved after some time that the person have not committed any offence, but he was arrested, so what is the recourse available to him?
Yes, of course. In this situation, then obviously the arrestee shall be released, but
I guess there was some issues from Radhaji's side. So yeah, so I guess they're joining in again.
Hello.
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible.
Hello?
Yeah, you are audible.
Yeah, so sorry, I got disconnected. So, yeah, if in case it is later found that the person has not committed any offense at all, then it is very unfortunate on part of that person. But there's very rare chance that anything can be done about it. Then obviously no further proceedings. The problem here is that we need to understand that these are pre-trial arrests, and these are arrests only for the purpose of assuring that the person will appear as and when the trial comes up, and that he will not tamper with any of the evidences before the trial. And therefore, if a person is kept under custody, then it is for the purpose of just ensuring that. And unfortunately, in these cases, the period of the amount of period for which they are kept in is, I don't know how they're keeping them inside for so long, but these are supposed to be arrests only for a short duration of time. And later on, if it is then determined that the offense was not committed at all, then the person will be released. And there is no such remedy available against any officer who has conducted such an arrest in the course of his duties.
I guess many of the questions have already been taken up, and if there, as you can all see on your screen, if there are any issues which is not yet been taken up or which is by chance missed, you can always contact Radhaji and Navjotji on their mail IDs and on the contact numbers provided.
Yes.
So you can, so you can always get your answers, your queries, your concerns your queries you are answered. So now, before winding up, Navjot, if there is anything you want to take up?
No, that's
Any
it.
question?
I think almost all the important provisions have been taken care of.
Okay. So just before...
just a minute, Gurpreet is asking, Constitution does not save the citizen from this. Yes, it does save, but it can only save you at the time of the arrest. At the time of arrest, you can always file a writ petition stating and trying to prove that you have not committed such a crime. But there are other constitutional remedies and by way of writ petition, and you can also ask for anticipatory bail. But Constitution doesn't exactly save you from the wrongdoing of another person.
Right.
Okay. So as before winding up, I would just like to brief you all about OptoTax, like what it is. I have in the chat box, I could see many of you were asking about OptoTax. So OptoTax is basically a knowledge sharing and technology platform which we have curated for you all. In the starting, I told my audience, but unfortunately, because we have to give the dice to Navjotji and Radhaji for their deliberation, I would like just 5-10 minutes of yours so that I could brief you a little about it. So it's a knowledge sharing and technology platform which is being trusted by 50,000 plus tax professionals across India to file returns of over 1 million plus clients. So if any of you, I guess most of you must be doing GST practice. So if any of you are doing GST practice, I would personally recommend you to start using OptoTax today. I have even started the offer in the chat box. It must be visible on your screen. You just can get the details about it by filling up the simple form. And we always have focused on knowledge sharing and upgradation of skills, because we believe knowledge is the key to success, right? Agar we will not update our knowledge, if we won't update the skills which we require, we won't be able to serve our clients in the most beneficial manner. Reason being, we keep on doing such webinars, as many of you might have attended. There were people who have attended most of more than 23 even webinars for us. So this is the this is what we have earned in these 3 years. It's been 3 years, and it's been trusted, as I said, by 50,000 plus tax professionals. So even if you'll start using it today, you will get the data from 1st July 2017 itself. So you don't have to worry about your data, and it's completely secured. You can always reach out to us, and this is created after receiving your feedback. We had a survey, and we asked all the tax professionals about the concerns they want. So we created a compliance tool for your benefit. And yes, was a little about OptoTax, and I hope you really enjoyed using OptoTax. Many of you must have signed up, and those who are not, I have started the offer. You can start, you can get the details and start using. And we are coming with various webinars in the coming days, so stay tuned, stay connected with us on all. We are across the social media, so stay connected, stay tuned, and keep using OptoTax. Anything you want to contribute, or should we end?
We can end.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, so stay safe, stay happy, and see you tomorrow with another webinar on burning issues in ITC with CA Vineet Rathi. And have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Good evening.